our next topic, we have the BRICS. They've expanded their global footprint. Following the 15th annual BRICS Summit, which was held in Johannesburg, South Africa this week, the bloc of 5 major emerging economies have announced the admission of 6 new members: Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina, and the UAE. The new bloc represents roughly 46% of the world's population and accounts for 29% of the world's gross domestic product. David, can you tell me what you foresee with this ever-expanding BRICS movement and global community?
Okay, well, there's been a real big debate about the feasibility of Brics currency, okay? But there's been some theories around 25, 30, 40 years ago that, would say things, look, first they use oil to buy gold, then they use oil to buy dollars. And so that came in. But what has happened is that oil now functions as the true gold in this modern world. And so when the world started needing oil, which, for the gold, it was dropped as backing a US dollar, and that gold was dropped, and then they replaced it with oil. And so most people today see fiat currency. They look at fiat currency and they look through the US dollar as like the center of everything. But that's sort of like, that's not the best way to do it, because the real base layer of our global financial system is not the US dollar, it's energy. Oil is the real value here. And while this is an old theory, but it makes sense to now, because when you look at this new BRICS formula, they've gathered 50 to 51% of the oil exporters into this. Now you think, well, how could that bother us? Well, those of us that are old enough, we remember the cartel that cut the tap off to America, and we were in a bit of a mess for a while and everything. And so the thing is that when these guys can cut off the oil or charge what they want, we have to understand that our money is based as a fiat currency, and then we're borrowing all this money, but it's really the supply of oil that will drive us, with the exception of gold, and maybe some people say the Bitcoin. Every asset, all my assets that I have in a portfolio, every asset you have in your pension fund, its value, its evaluation is based on the supply of cheap oil. Okay. When Russia took 1/3 of their oil off the global markets, inflation started going up, and it's going back up again. And so we're seeing all these problems. And so now that they control 50% of the global export market, what can they do? They can import inflation into America. There's no more cheap oil. We're not going back down to $50 oil or $40 oil with this current administration to pump the pipe, start turning on, because the cost of production has gone up. America has been shutting down pumps that at $80 oil. They should be selling it if they can make money at $80 in oil, but they can't. And so since they control oil prices, they'll have control over our inflation, which means they have control over our U.S. treasuries. They'll be able to control how much we pay and how much it'll be. And so the federal government will not be able to control inflation. They'll not be able to do anything. And all they have to do is turn down the spigot a little more and turn the price of oil up. And then everything we buy is going to get higher. And the only way to stop it is, well, look, we could actually start pumping again, but we're going to be pumping high dollar oil. So all fiat currencies, all global prices, all stocks, bonds, all of that is valued on cheap oil. I'm sorry, this stuff is not good. And then also you have the Saudis and the United Arab Immigrants. They're building bridges to everybody. And China's working to rebuild Saudi Arabia and Iran and get them back together. And so now we have all this pressure that's coming on us. People, you should be praying, getting ready. Yeah. Oil is the base layer of all our so-called monetary system, not U.S. dollars. Does Washington understand this? No, we got a president that's asleep at the wheel. And, you know, if you want to see a real hockey stick type graph that shows you how oil has become so important, 100 years ago, we needed about 10,000 trilliwatts of power. How much does the world consume now? 160,000 trilliwatts of power. Energy. Energy is the new brick currency. That's my opinion. That's old theories and everything, but I think it shows us a problem that the world is in right now.
In the short to medium term, I agree with David Lister. In the short to medium term, of course, the United States, would take the United States 5 to 10 years to produce sasol plants like South Africa has to turn coal into a form of petroleum. It can be done, but it's not going to happen overnight. We can increase production. To some degree, the United States and Canada can immunize themselves in terms of independence, but because it's a global market, they cannot control the prices. In all of these things, I agree with David. Additionally, you have the stupidity of the present administration, and which is basically Obama's third term. You've got lightweights like Blinken, who nobody takes seriously in international affairs. You've got Jake Sullivan, who's again somebody who's a lightweight who nobody takes serious. In the economic sphere, you have a blithering idiot, Janet Yellen, just a blithering idiot. You have Powers, who's another useless tool. We have an incompetent administration and a senile president. This is all very true. This exasperates it. And these BRICS things would not be happening in the way they are or to the degree they are if it were not for Joe Obama. However, that is the short to medium term. I'd like to just make a prediction. I'm not saying a prophecy. I'm saying a prediction. Call it sanctified deduction, but I'm not saying thus saith the Lord. I'm just reading from Revelation chapter 6. When he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature come. I look and behold a black horse, and he who sat upon it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard, as it were, a voice in the center of the four living creatures. A quart, that is a denarius, a day's wages of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Do not harm the oil. That oil, of course, is not petroleum. And the wine. Do not, but it's talking about grain products. It is my prediction that not in the short term, but in the medium to long term, what David is saying about oil, energy units, is going to become true about food. China is in trouble. China, it is in trouble in terms of food production and agriculture. It's a mess. It rivers everything. The whole agronomic system of China is just an underreported disaster on top of their other problems. What you see happening with the Ukraine and with the steps of South West Europe, now you have the grain shipments not coming through the Dardanelles from the Black Sea. Notice that the BRICS conference did not address Ukraine. Putin didn't show up, and they did not address the implications of this grain shortage for Africa. It was not even addressed at the BRICS conference in Johannesburg. I have no doubt that the people in Washington and in New York, they're going to say, how can we keep on top when these things are happening? These guys have BRICS, they don't have to worry about democracy because most of the countries who dominate BRICS are not democracies.
Right.
Partial exceptions of India and Brazil, but Saudi Arabians don't care about democracy. Russia, China, they're not democratic countries. They can do what they want. They don't have to worry about public opinion, votes, elections, anything like that. Okay. And they have a large market. And Africa is the one place in the world without a demographic time bomb based on shrinkage. They have a demographic time bomb based on population explosion. It's still heading that way. So what's the solution? What is something the United States, Canada, to a degree Australia can do that can dominate the world economy that other countries cannot presently compete with, especially with the demise of what's happening in Ukraine? That is food. That is food. And that is one of the reasons why the West wants the Ukraine war. It drives up grain prices and it drives up the economic power of the United States. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen short to medium term. In the short to medium term, I do agree energy is going to be a very major factor. But in the medium to long term, from what I can see in the book of Revelation, it is going to be food. Yep. And another factor is going to be water, but I digress.
You know, it's interesting, Jacob. Canada has so much fresh water. They hold something like, I think, 30 or 40 or 50% of the world's fresh water. And they're the fourth largest exporter of oil in the world. But yet they're run by a communist, basically, Trudeau. And I don't know how much they want to help. They seem to be in the pocket of a China and the enemy of truth.
Trudeau's in the pocket of Schwab.
Yeah, there you go. 6 of one who's in the pocket of the Chinese.